The Alliance is a coalition of all the Bicycle Colorados and all the Bike Denvers across North America. We are a little over 200 organizations strong now, and we really play a sort of behind-the-scenes role to help network, support, train all these wonderful grassroots advocates who really make so much of the magic happen in communities across this country. So, creating, strengthening, uniting, that's the mission of the Alliance. The benchmarking report is a project we've been working on for about 7 years now, because like any good advocate, we need good data to be able to make the case for biking and walking. So I might be talking a little bit about some of that. A couple of numbers for you. This benchmarking report is full of numbers. This report pulls together 19 different sources of government data, some endemic research, lots of things that are hidden and buried and hard to digest, and we spend a ton of time pulling this together, doing cross-correlations, working with academics and researchers, and call out some really great stuff for advocates to be able to use. So, a few numbers, some of which you may be familiar with. 50 million cyclists. That's how many cyclists there are in this country. Collectively, we make over 4 billion trips by bicycle. The benchmarking report, this is actually our third report that we just released about 10 days ago. It's already been downloaded, I think, 3,200 times, and we've distributed over 700 hard copies. And it is a hefty book, but what's inside is really important. 11.5% of all trips are made by biking and walking. A full 11.5% of all trips. Some 13.5% of all fatalities are bicyclists and walkers. So it's a little disproportionate there. But what's really disproportionate is what we're investing in it. 1.6% of all federal funds are going into biking and walking. Okay? Not some of what you're hearing out there, but I mean, here's a nice sort of graphic representation. We're 12% of trips, 14% of fatalities, and we're getting a measly little 1.6 sliver of the transportation budget. That works out to $2.17 per person per year in this country. All right? That's the transportation budget, and there we are, that pink little tiny sliver. It's not a whole lot, but this money is doing tons of good around this country. Over 3,000 projects in all 50 states, creating thousands of jobs, and we could be spending all that 1.6% to build 15 miles of interstate, or we could be building all these amazing trails, bike lanes, education programs, bike parking, safe routes to school. So we're getting a pretty good bang for our dollar, I would say, as opposed to another 15 miles of the same old that isn't doing our country any good. This is sort of a breakout of the different sources of federal funding. And one thing I want to make very clear is that there's a lot more money that's happening at the state and local level. But the federal funding is very important in helping set a precedent. And in some states, it's about the only dollars that are being spent for bicycling and walking. So transportation enhancements is the biggest piece of that pie. Safe routes to school is the next biggest piece. But there are several other sources of funding. And this is one of the things that the Alliance and League's partnership, the Advocacy Advance partnership, is working on, is to help educate and train not only advocates, but local government elected officials, local government agencies, on all the different sources of ways that money can be spent to benefit and support better bicycling and walking. So that's without a new dollar allocated to biking and walking on the federal scheme. We hope to see it dedicated on the more local level. So the benchmarking report is full of all sorts of charts and rankings and so forth. So you can see Colorado's up there pretty well. You know, Denver's doing pretty well in the city ranking, and there it is for walking as well. But we were able to do all these cross-correlations and start looking at some interesting trends. So we can see that on the top chart, the darker orange is the higher levels of biking and walking. So we can see Colorado's doing really well. And then the bicyclist risk by state on the bottom here, we can start to see these interesting correlations with the north and the west having higher levels, and we can start to see that there is a safety in numbers benefit here. Some of the demographics, there's a lot of myths out there, you know, oh, well, bicycling, it's, I mean, there's good stuff, like it's the new golf, we want to promote that sort of thing, right? But it's not just the white guys thing. It is truly, when you look at the ethnicity, it is a very equal representation of Americans as a whole. Bike-to-work trips, maybe Hispanics are a little more overrepresented by 22% here, as opposed to 16% of the population, but that's a pretty small. I mean, when you look at the orange slice being Caucasians, and then the other slices of African Americans and so forth, it's pretty even distribution. And the same thing when we look at the economic levels. So bicycling and walking is something that everyone does enjoy, and so there's a lot of good from that. There's a lot of interesting things we call out in here, and I'm just going to zoom in on this chart here, which looks at state funding and the percentage of bike ped fatalities. So we can see down here, some pretty bad numbers. These are the percentages of people who are killed biking and walking. Here's the amount of dollars of safety funds, federal safety dollars, that these states are spending, and the percentage. And you can see that Florida, well, there's Colorado, so Colorado's spending 0 of its federal safety funds on bicycling and walking. Sure, a lot of it's going to good things like, drunk driving awareness and so forth, but when we have bicycling and walking being 14% of all trips, we should be looking at trying to get a fair share for safety. So Colorado's doing a little better than most of the rest of the country, with only 11.5% of all fatalities are bicyclists and pedestrians, but, what's up with this? That just doesn't jive. I mean, Florida has the best, they're spending 15 cents per capita, a whopping 4%, and they have 21% of all traffic fatalities are bicyclists and pedestrians. So, again, we're nowhere getting near our fair share for safety. And then there's some really alarming stats. Seniors are at greatest risk. A lot of people worry about kids. Kids are actually the safest group, in part because they're resilient, in part because they're not usually going to speeds or riding in traffic, whatever. But here we can see that 10% of the population of pedestrians are seniors, but they account for 15% of fatalities. In cyclists, they make up about 6% of the population, and they're making up 10% of the fatalities. So, so we actually have AARP on as one of our sponsors and supporters working with us. So you may have heard in the media, words about 10%. Oh, we're spending 10% of our dollars on transportation dollars on bicycling and walking. And that is a flat-out myth, and actually it's more than a myth, it's a lie. And we actually think that, given the fact that bicycling and walking are 12% of all trips, yes, it should be 10% of federal funding going to biking and walking. But right now, we're really just trying to work to preserve that measly little 1.6% of the funding we have. And I just want to tell you quickly what's happening in Congress, because this is happening right now. How many folks heard about the vote last Thursday in the House T&I Committee, Transportation Infrastructure, okay? So we lost by 2 votes, 27 to 29. We had 3 incredibly brave Republicans from Illinois, Wisconsin, and New Jersey who stood up to their leadership, who literally was offering them deals and bribes and threats if they didn't, to come vote with them. This has now become a House House leadership bill. Chairman Micah is just a figurehead in this game. And what the House has done is literally go through the federal transportation bill that's existed for 20 years, that's spending a measly 1.6% funding on biking and walking. And they've systematically picked out, not just taken out safe routes to school and transportation enhancements, but they're literally going in and saying, oh, these guarantees to make certain that there's safe bike and pedestrian access on bridges when bridges are built, we don't need that anymore. Bike ped coordinators at the state level, we don't need those anymore. They've literally pulled out anything to do with bicycling and walking. Just kicked it right out. So we need to kill the bill in the House. I think we're going to have a good chance to do that because the leadership has also decided to take out the 20% of funding that goes to pay for mass transportation. That should just come out of the general fund instead of out of the transportation funding. So that's one where we've got a fight ahead of us. So tell your House members, your representatives in Congress to kill the transportation bill in the House. It's just it's nothing but bad. On the Senate side, we're not doing much better. We've got this new category called additional activities. And all the bicycling and walking programs have been lumped together to compete with each other. And environmental protections have been added in our state. We're advocating for health. We're advocating for quality of life and better communities. So 30 minutes per day of physical activity is what the Surgeon General recommends, right? Pretty basic, half hour. We've got 48 of them to choose from during the day. Just got to make one of them where we're biking or walking. Only 20% of the U.S. population actually does that. And it is costing us 365,000 premature deaths every year. Okay? So anytime you're speaking before a city council, before a state legislature, Remind them of these basic numbers, because this is a huge problem. It's way bigger than us. But we're part of the solution.